The film opens during the reign of the Qing dynasty, ordered by Emperor Yangzong. The emperor formed a secret assassination force known as the Guillotines. These Guillotines were typically tasked with assassinating anyone who hated or threatened the emperor. However, the Qing dynasty government acted harshly, oppressing the nobility. Because of this, many citizens rebelled in search of justice. Their actions were aided by the rebel leader, often referred to as Wolf or Tian Lang. Wolf's followers, known as herders, were quite numerous, as he promised to free the people from the oppression perpetrated by the king's government. One night, while Wolf was gathering with his followers, he discovered that one of them was a government spy. So, without further ado, Wolf immediately stabbed the man. At that moment, the Guillotines appeared, attacking Wolf and the others with their epic, round, sharp weapons. The weapons were so sharp that they could even decapitate humans. The Guillotines consisted of their leader, Ling, Musin, Ohia, Sisan, Chentai, Hutusu, and Buka. Using these weapons, they finally captured Wolf. Here, I'll explain a little about the Guillotines, a group of assassins created by the Qing dynasty. All members of the Guillotines were from Manchuria and under the emperor's orders. To maintain their loyalty, Guillotines members were forbidden to learn to read and write. The next day, Wolf was imprisoned in the castle. There, Leng met with Wolf to ask what plan he and his followers had devised. However, Wolf ignored the discussion and instead stated that he knew about his fate, to be killed by Leng, and because of his guilt as a rebel leader, Wolf would be executed. The following day, we saw the rebels being executed by beheading. Shortly thereafter, a group of soldiers carried Wolf away, who was also about to be executed. However, at the same time, a man suddenly appeared from above and freed Wolf. It turned out that the man was not alone, because he and other rebels came to fight the soldiers and help Wolf. In the commotion, the rebels gained the upper hand and were able to fight off several other soldiers. Finally, the Guillotinist forces appeared and surrounded them. The fight continued, with Musin throwing his signature weapon at Wolf. Fortunately, Wolf managed to deflect it with his sword and then took Musin hostage. Musin ordered the others to attack Wolf, regardless of the consequences. Meanwhile, the rebels had already prepared a bomb for their next attack. Within seconds, the bomb exploded, destroying the entire village. It was then that the other Guillotinists realized that Musin had disappeared along with Wolf. When the Guillotinists returned to the temple, the Guillotinist leader, Erzha Gongyi, held a funeral ceremony for Musin, believing him dead without a search. Furthermore, he ordered the others to continue their hunt for Wolf. They also lured Wolf into their presence by holding one of the rebels, Balin, hostage. Furthermore, Emperor Yongzheng's son, Emperor Qianlong, would send his trusted agent, Heidu, on the same mission. Xin then pointed out that when the Guillotines were young, the emperor chose Hadu and Leng to accompany his son in play. After a period of training, the emperor chose Leng to lead the Guillotines. Hadu remained with the emperor's son. This prompted the adult Heidu to feel unfair, as he considered Leng less formidable. Meanwhile, Menzu was tied up in a hut, then released and tied up again before being beaten by a group of unknown men. Meanwhile, the Guillotines threw Balon into a well, warning that if they failed to find Musin, they would return to kill her. Seeing this, Haidu disagreed with them, as it was not part of their duties. However, Lang ignored them and simply left with the other Guillotines. Haidu remained to accompany Balon. Lang and the others then went to the Wuguan area. There, they saw Wolf giving a lecture to the villagers. Initially, the other guerrillas were ready to attack. However, they stopped when they saw several villagers also preparing their weapons. However, their attention was diverted when the guards arrived, giving Wolf a chance to escape. Lang then asked a local merchant, who told him about a traveler willing to buy a cow and a large amount of museum powder. Lang was convinced that the traveler was Wolf. Elsewhere, Wolf freed Musin's bonds. However, Musin immediately attacked Wolf, forcing Wolf to counterattack and knock him out. Meanwhile, Su, who was walking around the village, was suddenly pickpocketed by a man. Su chased the man to his house and beat him. However, he immediately stopped when he saw that the man had many children. So Su let them have the money and medals. Back again to Lang and the other Guillotines, who went to watch a puppet show. There, it was shown that two people were fighting, and one of them cut off the opponent's leg. After that, Lang and the others found a piece of writing and also red paper that had been cut into pieces. They tried to put them together, but because these Guillotines couldn't read, Haidu tried to read it to them. It turned out that the contents of the writing were instructions from Wolf, who told his followers to go to the Chu spicy shop. Without further ado, Haidu and Lang immediately went there. Upon arriving there, the two of them saw the villagers who had been freed by Wolf from slavery. Their wolf revealed the cruelty of the dynasty that continue to oppress the little people and kill innocent people. That's why Wolf invited them to join in eradicating the cruelty of the dynasty. In the midst of his lecture, Wolf walked up to Lang and grabbed his head, reminding Lang of his violent past. Haidu then attempted to attack Wolf, but the crowd stopped him, and Wolf managed to escape. Afterward, Lang was approached by a small child who handed him the Su medal. Lang also remembered a Huang performance he had seen, telling him about a duel between two men who had cut off one of their opponent's legs. So, Lang immediately went to see Su, who was guarding the well. And sure enough, Su was dying after his leg was cut off by an unknown person. This made Lang realize that the Huang stories in the village were fabricated by Wolf. As a result, Cizan went to the Weiyang performance and killed the puppeteer. The commotion enraged the villagers, who attempted to attack the guerrillas. After burying Su, Lang and the others devised a plan to attack. They discovered that a place inhabited by people with smallpox had become a rare place for people to pass through. There were also many red papers taped to the door, so they immediately went there and set fire to the place. Meanwhile, Wolf unlocked the code on a piece of paper, inviting Lang to meet and bring Bela. He also revealed the message, which included an invitation to bring Musin to the throne. Before Lang could meet, Haidu warned him to retreat to save his own life. Considering Wolf a formidable opponent, Lang refused, insisting on saving Musin. Haidu finally revealed the secret. Qianlong would become emperor, and at that time, he would replace the Guillotines with a highly advanced armed force. As a final step in the Guillotines, Leng would defeat Wolf, and afterward, Leng would let his members go on to live their new lives. Leng, meanwhile, would accompany Heidu elsewhere. Wolf fed Musin before finally telling him the true story of the dynasty's cruelty. Wolf's father was also a victim of the Yongzheng Empire. He was beheaded simply because Wolf's father wrote a book about the Ming dynasty, which ultimately triggered the Qing dynasty. From then on, Wolf lived with his 3 brothers. However, the Yongzheng emperor instead ordered his right-hand man, Musan's father and leader of the Guillotines, to slaughter all 4 children, leaving only Wolf to survive. From there, Wolf began living alone, haunted by the gruesome incident. After hearing the story, Musan felt guilty, as the Guillotines were always paid 10 taels for each head they beheaded. The heads would later be displayed in the temple as trophies of their accomplishments. The day of the exchange arrived. The Guillotines and the Wolf Party met there. However, as they were about to exchange Balin for Musin, a group of men armed with rifles suddenly appeared and attacked the herders, shooting Balin. Leng was shocked by the attack and scolded Heidu for his armed forces' sudden attack. Heidu had no choice, as it was the emperor's will. Seeing Balin seriously injured, Musin and Wolf carried her away while the Guillotines attacked the armed forces. Fortunately, the Guillotines and herders survived the attack and fled to safety. This incident reached Emperor Qianlong, and he ultimately decided to sentence all the Guillotines to death for betraying the emperor by supporting the enemy. Furthermore, Leng told his men to get as far away as possible to escape the emperor's punishment. He also told them all about the emperor's plan to replace the Guillotines with armed forces. He knew this because Leng was part of the team and Heidu worked for the emperor. This fact naturally angered the other Guillotines. Despite this, Leng wanted his members to leave safely and survive. The emperor then issued a decree that anyone who found and killed the Guillotines would receive a reward. As time went on, the Guillotines were brutally killed, one by one. This incident naturally saddened Leng and angered him, as the armed forces refused to let his friends go. However, Heidu also couldn't stand Leng's angry attitude. As a result, Heidu pushed Leng down a cliff. Fortunately, Wolf found Leng and nursed him back to health in a remote village. Seeing the friendly and peaceful villagers, Leng felt welcomed by them. Leng then asked Wolf why he had saved her. Even though he had always been evil and had always hunted Wolf, Wolf expressed his pity for Leng, as Wolf had often helped others who had also lost their purpose. There, Leng also met Musin, now a permanent resident, who revealed that he no longer wanted to be a Guillotine because he had learned of the cruelty the Guillotines had committed against innocent people. After reflecting, Leng finally confessed that he was actually Han. Han people were typically enslaved by the emperor. However, Emperor Yongzheng chose Leng to serve as Emperor Qianlong's right-hand man, only changing his identity to Manchurian. Although Leng was now on Wolf's side, Wolf prophesied that his death would be at Leng's hands. A few days later, Emperor Qianlong directed his armed forces to attack Wolf Village and his followers. They immediately evacuated the villagers. Wolf, Musin, Leng, and the other herders remained behind to counterattack. In this battle, the Heidu army used firearms and cannons. As a result, the entire village was quickly overthrown. Unfortunately, Musin was shot in the attack. Ling wept and mourned Musin's death. Heidu then completely destroyed the Han village and found Leng on the edge of the mountain with Wolf. Wolf then thought that it was time to declare peace with the emperor and asked Leng to kill him to end the war. Leng was forced to kill Wolf and behead him. After that incident, Heidu and Leng returned to the palace carrying the wolf's head. They then presented the head to Emperor Qianlong as proof of the rebellion's defeat. Leng and Heidu also received praise from the emperor and believed that his glory in leading the Qing dynasty would be successful. However, Leng emphasized to Emperor Qianlong that as long as he continued to oppress the small people and commit cruel acts, his glory would never come. Therefore, Leng reminded the emperor to make peace and alleviate the suffering of the people to maintain his vision. And because Emperor Qianlong had a goal to eradicate the guerrillas, Leng, who was one of them, surrendered himself to be killed. Hearing this, Heidu tried to stop Leng's actions. However, Leng remained stubborn. As a result, the emperor still executed Leng. The credits explain that Emperor Qianlong was one of the longest rulers who managed to maintain peace between Manchuria and Han. However, there is no mention of guerrillas during his reign in history. The film ends.